This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
I'm Charlie Navarrete.
So put your feet up, cuddle up next to someone you love, have something to eat and drink because that always makes me happy. I said I like to eat and drink, and so it makes me happy when you guys do. And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me. In the first half, we have our recipe of the week and inappropriate things people have witnessed at a funeral. In the second half, I'm talking about food and fluids, or food and fluids at the end of life. And in our third half, we have interviewed Sally about her father's decision not to eat or drink anymore. So, Charlie, you got the first half ready for us?
Yes. So, the social platform Reddit asked, what's the most inappropriate thing you've witnessed at a funeral? We have some of those responses, edited for length, and I promise we did not make these up. So, the mother of a deceased putting on a terrible act and meth-fueled show about just how much she loved and missed her daughter. Shortly thereafter, she was convicted of the daughter's murder.
Oh, my God.
Next, my grandfather was always a trickster. He had this little song he would sing to me, my siblings, and my little cousins, where he would just repeat the words poop poopy doo over and over. At his funeral,
like,
my aunt... What?
Boop boopy doo? Like that?
No, that's more like Betty Boop. This is poo poo doo. Yeah. Poop poopy doo.
Oh.
Wait a minute. Okay. How did Betty...
Boop boop doo.
That's it. Boop boop doo. Boop 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 doo. Well, okay. I'm sure everyone can hear the difference. So to repeat the words poop poopy doo over and over. So at his funeral, my aunt was telling stories about him. And in the middle of her telling a story, my 6-year-old cousin screamed, poop poopy doo, in front of 50 people. Needless to say, it lightened the mood a little bit and made everyone a little happier remembering him in a good way.
Aw, that's sweet.
Yeah. At another funeral, at my grandfather's funeral, the stand-in, curmudgeonly pastor kept calling my grandfather by the wrong name. Pastor, we are here to memorialize the life of John Smith. So the crowd looks very confused. John Smith lived a good life. I had never personally met John Smith, but then my wife just loudly, well, I've never met John Smith either. His name was Bob White. Oh, dear.
How sad to have your name not even right at your funeral.
It's like an episode of Frasier or something. It was a funeral for an uncle in Greece in the summer where the church is very full and incredibly hot. Not totally unexpectedly, a man standing near the back faints. Now, this guy was very tall and rather broad, thus he was really difficult to carry outside to get some air. So somebody had the brilliant idea that the pallbearer should carry him out. They pick him up, like they would the casket, and start carrying toward the door. Suddenly, he wakes up, grasps what's going on, and starts yelling, I'm alive! I'm alive!
It's alive!
Oh, Young
what
Frankenstein.
Movie is that from?
Young Frankenstein.
Oh, is that what it's from? Yeah.
Wait a minute. The original was It's Alive, but didn't...
Yeah, I thought that was the original. But is that in Young Frankenstein too?
Or does he say he's alive? I don't remember. Alive. I don't remember if he says if Gene Wilder says it's alive or he's alive.
I think it's he's alive.
I think it is he's alive.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we've solved that problem, maybe we can take care of the situation in the Middle East. So,
see, all they had to do was ask Charles.
Yes, exactly. And since we are talking about strange things, our recipe of the week is just as weird and confusing. This classic congealed salad recipe is made with peanut-shaped, fluorescent orange marshmallow candies known as circus peanuts.
Hey,
Yes,
I was in Family Dollar the other day,
yeah.
and much to my surprise, they were selling them there. It's like, I don't think I've seen those in forever.
Did they only have the orange, or did they have the banana ones as well?
No, only orange.
Yeah,
I used to love those.
Yeah, me too. I remember the first time I saw them in yellow. They were banana.
I don't know that I've ever seen them in yellow.
So anyway, these bad boys were popular in the 18th century as penny candy. The reason why this...
You mean the 19th century? Were they popular?
I was seeing if you were paying attention, Marianne, and obviously you passed that test. So you be looking for that packet of peanuts, circus peanuts I'll be sending you in the mail.
I expect to see those too. You don't think I don't?
Oh, I've done it. Yes, it was in the 19th century as penny candy. And, penny candy, and I think her grandmother then became Money Penny of James Bond fame. I don't quote me on that. I could be mistaken. The reason why this particular Jell-O salad is confusing is because circus peanuts make absolutely no sense at all. Do they taste like peanuts? Absolutely not. Why are they banana flavored? No clue. Is the obscenely neon orange color necessary? Heck no. But do we still succumb to the sentiment of this retro congealed salad made with canned pineapple and Cool Whip? Of course, you Debbie Downer. So, fluff up, and after this thing you will be fluffed up, and enjoy this concoction known the world over, if the world is a Twilight Zone, as the candy peanut Jell-O salad. Is that correct, Marianne?
Circus peanut.
Circus peanut, whatever. Circus peanut Jell-O salad. And, fun fact, did you know that Lucky Charms cereal was inspired by circus peanuts?
No.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
General Mills employee chopped the spongy marshmallow candies into tiny bits, sprinkled them over his morning Cheerios, thought to himself, what a funky breakfast treat, and the rest is history. He was taken out and shot. No,
he's probably high, Charles.
Really. Yeah. Well, after that, yeah. So, please go to our webpage for a link for the recipe and additional resources for this program. We hope you will follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and remember to rate and review this podcast. As a nonprofit organization, we are dependent on the kindness of strangers and always appreciate your donations. Please go to our webpage.
And kindness of people we know. And kindness of people we know. You don't have to be a stranger.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Support our work.
Yes.
Or you support our work, you can become our friend.
Kind of like Mr. Rogers.
Will you be my friend?
Mr. Rogers is dead. Because everyone dies.
Everyone dies.
Yes, yes. Which, coincidentally, is also the title of our webpage. www.everyonedies. That's every, the number one, dies.org. Marianne.
Well, thank you for that, Charles. In our second half, I'm going to continue the conversation about the peri-death period. And the last hours of life we conceptualize as a peri-death period, which specifically encompasses the symptoms and experiences right before death. Then there's a period where there's the actual death, and then the care of the body after death. So this time, this peri-death period, really requires intensive holistic care. So for this episode in the peri-death period, we're talking about symptoms and experiences before death in terms of this preparation phase, the hallmark of which is the realization and acknowledgement that death is inevitable and near. Even if it has been considered before, this is when the family and the person who's dying begin to prepare, like actively prepare for the death. And the symptom we're going to focus on today is anorexia and dehydration. Anorexia is not wanting to eat, and dehydration is not having enough fluid in your body. So as patients approach the end of life, they may say that they're not hungry, which is a normal pre-death finding. This is normal. Decreased eating results in what's called a metabolic imbalance, where the energy that a patient takes in does not cover the energy that they are putting out. That can result in a state of dehydration. Although healthy people who are experiencing dehydration are going to report pain, abdominal cramps, nausea, vomiting, dry mouth, people who are terminally ill do not report these symptoms. At the end of life, patients typically only complain about having a dry mouth, which is often unrelated to the hydration process and most often is the result of medication side effect, increased respirations, or mouth breathing. So in last week's show, I reminded everyone that the body is, when it's shutting down, when it's approaching death, it's focused on keeping the heart moving, keeping the brain supplied with blood. It doesn't care about eating or digesting food. And so I want you to remember that. It's not that the person who's dying really hates you and isn't going to eat your chicken salad. It's that they just really don't want it. Their body doesn't want it, and their body doesn't know what to do with it if they were to eat it. But food has a meaning for us. It represents more than nutrition to many families and can have a vital role in helping them maintain hope and providing comfort to the patient. It's incredible that attempts to feed the dying patient are not only frustrating to everyone involved, but can also add to the patient's suffering. Also, in many cases, artificial hydration and nutrition provide an opportunity or seem to provide an opportunity to do something at a time when the mistaken perception is that there's little else that they have that they can do. But there are so many things that you can do. You can hold their hand. You can be close. You do not need to use technology in order to help somebody have a good death. Now, putting in an IV so that they receive IV fluids for somebody who's actively dying is going to increase the urinary output. They're going to need to urinate more, pee more, which can result in the necessity for a Foley catheter, that catheter that goes up through the urethra so that the urine goes in it, because they might not have the energy to get out of bed to go get rid of all of that urine. Or they might end up urinating in the bed, which then requires they get upset about it. You get upset about it. You got to change the whole bed. You're moving them back and forth to change the bed. You're making them hurt. What's the point? It's not a helpful intervention at this point of a person's life. Also, putting in more fluids can increase respiratory secretions, the spit, that kind of thing. And if somebody's having trouble swallowing, it's just going to kind of collect in their mouth or kind of drool out. It can increase cough, as well as increase the stomach fluids that can lead to the abdomen kind of getting big and swollen. It can cause nausea and vomiting. Increasing the amount of fluid in the veins when there's decreased kidney function can result in swelling of the hands and feet and can increase the risk of decubitus ulcers. Pain can also result from the IV and the restraints that may be necessary to prevent the patient from removing the tubing. The presence of the IV may act as a physical barrier to family and may be a cause of anxiety to them because they're afraid, oh my God, what am I going to do if that IV pulls out? The point of us talking about this is for you to see that it's adding more risk and burden to the patient than it is in helping. In essence, artificial nutrition and hydration at this stage can lead to symptoms of congestive heart failure, increased in tracheal or bronchial symptoms, back in the back of your throat, nausea, vomiting, painful swelling, diarrhea, and it doesn't do anything to improve symptoms or prolong life. It's not going to help the way you intuitively would think it would, because you're coming from a point of view of, well, here's how the body normally works. But the body's not working normally now. It's dying. And so its needs are different. In contrast, there are many benefits to the patient if they don't eat or drink as death nears. With calorie deprivation, or not deprivation, but just not eating, comes an increased production of what are called ketones, which results in an elevation of normally naturally occurring opioid peptides, or endorphins, you hear about, that provide analgesia, makes its pain management. It's natural, built-in, God-created, or whatever your belief system is, built-in analgesia. So decreasing fluid intake can result in fewer fluids that are going into the lungs, which can make it easier for people to breathe, lessens coughing, and reduces that drowning sensations. If a tumor is present, dehydration can make it smaller by reducing the layer around the tumor, resulting in less pressure and pain. But let me be clear. I don't want you to think you heard me say that it's going to make the tumor smaller or shrink the tumor. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that that tumor has a squishy layer around it that as it grows, it can press against nerves, causing pain. So if the person's not taking in as much fluid, that squishy layer gets smaller. It's not pressing against the nerve and can help by alleviating or getting rid of the pain. So some things that help are to do really good mouth care to lessen mouth dryness and prevent sores or dental problems or infections. Scrupulous cleaning and moisturing of the mouth can be one of the most important interventions to prevent suffering in someone who is nearing death. The mouth and teeth can be cleaned with a soft bristled toothbrush or a sponge-covered oral swabs. But what you want to do is really kind of maintain moisture in the mouth lining. Not enough that people need to swallow it, but just to keep it moist. And the mouth can be rinsed with water if the patient's able to tolerate it. You can use a little spray bottle to mist the mouth to keep it moist. A room humidifier, cool mist vaporizer, that kind of thing can also be very helpful. They have products on the market that are salivary substitutes. They're called Salivert or Oral Balance or Saligen or Moisture. And these are little packets of spit. I mean, they're not real people's spit, but they're, manufactured spit that you can use to just keep the inside of the mouth moist.
As I'm hearing you say this, people die in different ways. A peaceful death. Others, just fight it. Sometimes, families or friends, are all on the same page. I just keep thinking when my mother died, just the intimacy of it. Because with her, I had a little piece of ice, and I just put that on her lips because they were dry, and just the intimacy of it. And I know it's not the case.
It's care that you don't get to give to your parents. Typically,
right?
We don't,
right. You know what?
They give to us. We don't get to give to them.
Yeah. There you are. They're extremely vulnerable at that time. At the end of their lives. Yes. Thank you. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And it's a tremendous gift to be able to do that for them.
Mm.
Now, another thing you can do is use chamomile tea. It's very soothing, and it can be used to clean the mouth. Or you can offer to the patient to sip on if they're still able to do that. Also, generously applying lip lubricant can prevent dry, chapped lips and alleviate any discomfort. When my sister was dying, her lips were really chapped, and I said to her husband, I said, did she have any, like, chapstick, anything like that? Because my sister didn't wear makeup. There wasn't like, if you went into my bathroom, you'd find plenty of things to put on my lips, but I couldn't find anything. He says, oh, she's got something in her car. My sister was a Montessori teacher, took care of, was a teacher for little children.
Yeah.
He comes back with this Halloween makeup kit with, like red, blue, and yellow, like stuff you could put on the lips. And he hands it. He says, here, this is what she has. And I looked at it, I said, I'm not looking to make her look like a clown.
But it was Halloween.
I thought, oh my God, if I really didn't like her, imagine what I could have done to her in that moment. But I didn't. It's essential for everyone involved in the care of the patient to realize that not providing food and fluids is not the same as not caring for the patient.
Right.
We seem to think that if we don't feed somebody, I don't care about you. And that's not what we're talking about. That we're concentrating on care in terms of meeting the needs of the dying person and providing an all-inclusive symptom management. If the patient is having oral pain, morphine or morphine elixir can be used if the pain is severe, or during mouth care, or if they're still eating to help them be able to swallow if they want to eat food. Things that can be put on to help mouth care, mouth pain is they have different kinds of solutions. A lot of times you'll see them called magic mouthwash, and you think, what's so magic about this? Well, usually it's some sort of blend of either lidocaine or kaopectate, Benadryl, and lidocaine that's mixed in equal parts, and you put in like 5 to 15 milligrams. It's all mixed together, comes from the pharmacy. And you swish it around in their mouth for a minute and have them spit it out or swallow it. And you can use it like every 2 to 4 hours. And how this works is the lidocaine provides a topical analgesia. The Benadryl is a short-acting anesthetic. And the kaopectate or Mylanta can often be substituted, serves as an alkalizing agent. So that works really well, and you can ask whoever the caregiver is, the primary provider, for a prescription for that. They can sip fluids. You can encourage, if they're still sipping fluids, things that have salts in them to help prevent electrolyte imbalance, like bouillon soup, tomato juice, sports drinks like Gatorade can usually be pretty well tolerated. You want to avoid citrus juices or foods that can irritate the mouth, as well as extremes of temperature in the food. You don't want it too hot, you don't want it too cold, just somewhere there in the middle. But it's important not to force food and fluids at this point, and to support the family who may be having a difficult time accepting that the patient is refusing to eat or drink. You can have all kinds of people coming in to help or give suggestions or whatever that tell you all kinds of things that God knows where they got the information.
The internet.
And it's not the right information.
But I saw it on the internet. It must be right. It's on the internet. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So listen to me, not them. Or more importantly, listen to your healthcare practitioner and then listen to me.
Yes.
So remember that even in the case of acute illness, like when you have the flu, how much food and fluids do you really want? Do you say,
point.
Oh my God, get that away from me? Or
Right.
if you open that can of tuna fish, I'm going to throw up. So get out of here. Right? You don't want it. You're sick. Well, but you get over your flu and you go back to eating. In this case, for different reasons, but still, you just don't want it. As death approaches, patients often lose their ability to swallow due to weakness or a decrease in their neurological function.
Mm-hmm.
So as this gag reflex weakens, secretions will tend to accumulate in the back of the throat. And so you'll hear a noise that has what people will call it. They'll call it a death rattle. And what it is that when air moves over those secretions, or air is moving over like a pocket of spit, it makes a rumbling noise or a death rattle. So it doesn't bother the patient at all, because their mouth is open, they're breathing, they're asleep, they're not here, they don't care. You who are sitting at the bedside are saying, "Holy Lord, what is that noise?" And it's got to be bothering them. So take it from me, it is not bothering them. What can you do? You can position them, put their shoulders and neck, like sit them up more. I'm going to tell you, you don't have to sit up, but it's drainage. It's just so it'll drain down the throat and not just sit and accumulate on the back of the throat.
But if somebody can't swallow, I mean.
Well, you don't have to swallow for fluids to naturally drip down.
Drip down. Okay.
It's just gravity. It'll go where it's supposed to go. But you don't, it's a little bit of spit. It's not a whole lot. Now you start putting in, if they can swallow a little bit of spit, let me get let me fill up this syringe full of bouillon and shove it in there. Well, that's a whole other story. No, do not do that. I'm not talking about that. But that little bit of spit, it can drip down.
Got it. Okay.
So we use, sometimes if there's a lot, we use scopolamine transdermal patches, which can be used to decrease the secretion production and decrease the occurrence of that death rattle. Now, those scopolamine patches are those ones, it looks like a little Band-Aid that people on cruises will use. That's all they are. You just put it on the neck. It doesn't have to be on the neck, but you put it on the neck, and that scopolamine is released, and it dries up the secretions. But remember, it's tough to listen to, but it's not causing any problem for the person who has it. In our third half, Charlie's going to introduce Sally, who was dealing with these issues. So, Charles?
So, Sally wrote to us when her father stopped eating and drinking after testing positive for COVID. He was in a hospice facility and had lived with Alzheimer's disease for 4 years. He waved away all food and fluids, and after 9 days, she asked, "Why is this taking so long?" which was the topic of this interview. Sally's dad lived for 23 days without eating or drinking.
So it was a really good opportunity to talk about this whole issue. And we think, well, it'll just be a couple of days. And it can be. It can be 5 to 7 days. It can be 10 to 12 days. It can be 30 days. And you think, oh my God, what is keeping them alive? When my mom had her stroke and I went to take care of her, she wasn't taking in anything orally. And she had a catheter in, and I'd be like, where is all this pee coming from? I just couldn't figure out where it was all coming from. And God, how many, it was like, I don't know, 10, 15 days before she died.
Okay.
But she was still peeing right up to the end. It's like, I don't know where all that was coming from. But it's not fast. Doesn't cause any distress, because the body's only worried about, heart pumping and the blood getting up to the brain. It's not worried about the rest of it. Feeling hunger pains. You don't care about it. But for the rest of us who are saying, how are they living 23 days without eating and drinking? Well, you can listen to the third half and find out what we talked about.
So today we're going to be talking with Sally Herbert. And let me tell you a little bit about Sally's story. Her dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2016, and he did pretty good. He was able to walk, do his walks, and he was eating and drinking, and he was doing pretty well. And then on July the 15th, he tested positive for the COVID-19 virus. And at that point, he stopped eating and drinking, became incontinent, combative, and they decided to put him in the hospital for dehydration and atrial fibrillation. But even in the hospital, he was still refusing to eat or to drink. So they sent him to a hospice facility, and he still continues to wave away the food. And when Sally wrote to me, she said, "Why is this taking so long?" So I want to introduce you to Sally Herbert. Sally, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Marianne.
So my summation of the story, does that sound, did I get it all right?
Yes, the only thing I would add is, yes, he was diagnosed on July 15th with COVID, and the facility where he was living did not provide a doctor to come in and see him and the other patients who had tested positive. So by July 23rd, when he was clearly going downhill, and we wanted him to be seen face-to-face by a doctor and not a telehealth medicine appointment, our only option was to have him transferred to the ER to get seen by a doctor. And it turns out that was the right decision, because in the ambulance is when he was diagnosed with AFib, and when he got to the hospital, he was diagnosed with liver damage due to severe dehydration.
Wow. So, I heard, your concern and your question in terms of why is this taking so long, and you verbalized to me the feeling like it's cruel not to give him food and fluids. Do you want to talk any more about that feeling?
Sure. When we transferred him from the hospital to hospice, our hope was that when he was surrounded by familiar family members, and of course we were all, dressed in PPE since he is COVID positive, our hope was that he would start taking some sips of broth or some water or something and start coming back to life to us. But he was waving away everything and wanted nothing to do with eating or drinking, and we were kind of confused by that, because before his COVID diagnosis, we would bring him lunch every Sunday and sit outside and through a window, talk to him, and we would each eat our respective sandwiches and have a little Sunday lunch together. So we were just really confused by him all of a sudden not eating and drinking, and we were wondering if maybe, he experienced the loss of smell and taste maybe when COVID came on, and that being an Alzheimer's patient, he really didn't understand that you kind of have to power through that and continue to eat and drink. But yeah, once he got to hospice and he wasn't eating and drinking, we quickly realized that, we're heading to the end here. And, when I Google how long can a person go without water, the answer I got was 3 to 4 days. And so I had kind of prepared myself for that. And now that we're on day 9 and, he's hanging on, of course, we're all brokenhearted and, we'd love to keep him, but clearly that's not what's happening. Clearly he's leaving us. And, I want him to have a peaceful passing.
Does he seem uncomfortable to you at all?
Well, he's on morphine and sedatives, so I don't think he's uncomfortable, but I don't know. It's an intense emotional roller coaster that we've been on since July 15th, and we're all just emotionally exhausted, and we're ready for him to have a peaceful end.
So I think if I can talk with you a bit about that and the wish for a peaceful end, is it sounds to me like he's having a peaceful end. He's not uncomfortable. He's not, looking for the vending machine or, trying to take other people's foods. He's comfortable. Who's not comfortable, though, is the family. And I think that that's because there's not really a clear understanding of what's going on. So when we, were to Google how long can you eat and go without eating or drinking, it depends, I guess, on how we search for that. Are we talking about people who are in terminal stage of life, or is it just a general question of how long can you go without eating and drinking? Because those are two completely different scenarios. Somebody who's at the end of life, it is normal and it is expected that they're not going to want to eat and drink. And let me tell you why. The body says, you're a woman, so I'm just going to stereotype you and say, have you ever done, like making Thanksgiving dinner? You got 40 things going on, and somebody walks in with, some flowers to arrange, and you say to yourself, I just can't deal with those flowers. I got too much going on. I can't deal with the flowers. Well, that's essentially what your dad's body is saying about food and fluids. It's like, I got too much going on, and the last thing I need right now is anything to digest, because the body's in the process of shutting down. Now, maybe initially he stopped eating and drinking because he couldn't smell and he couldn't taste, but those symptoms are now gone. Every time, and this is particularly true with people with Alzheimer's disease, every time there's I'm going to call it an insult to the body. So let's say he starts out at an 8, and he gets, a couple of years, I'm making up this whole scenario. A couple of years ago, he gets a flu. So his function's at an 8, but he gets a flu, and he drops down to a 6. You and I could get back up to our 8 because we have some reserves. But somebody who's in a state of that chronic disease, like Alzheimer's disease, doesn't have a reserve or the capacity to bring their body back. So he's gone from a 7 to a 6. He's going to stay at a 6, and he's going to travel along at a 6 until the next insult happens, whatever that may be. So let's say our next insult is COVID. All right, so that's going to drop him, let's say, down to a 3. We already know he's not going to be able to come back up. He's going to stay at that 3. And then he went to the hospital, and that took him down to a 2. And so do you see what's happening is his body, every insult that occurs, it can be as simple as a changing of the room at whatever nursing home he was at. You think to yourself, well, geez, Dad, the rooms all look the same. But there's something different there. That can cause a change of status. The flu, a cold, having to go to the hospital, any kind of thing like that. So wherever he was before July 15th, he's had a couple of steps down, and sounds like a lot of steps down. And, it's not like a linear thing where you say, well, every hospitalization takes you down 2 steps. I mean, it doesn't work like that, but you get the idea. He doesn't have what it takes to rebound. So his body at some point in there said, all right, I've had it. I can make my heart beat, and I can get my lungs to breathe. And, I'm going to keep oxygen and blood going to the brain. But all this stuff with the food and fluids, forget about it. It ain't happening. I can't do that. And so that's what his body's done. And that's a normal process of dying. Before we had, IVs and feeding tubes and all this other stuff, that's just how people died. You'd offer them a sip, and people would either take a little sip, or they would turn their head away and close their lips. I don't want it. And I honestly need to respect that, because the body can't deal with it. And there's actually benefits for letting the body do that. if you're not putting fluids in, and if he's saying no to the fluids, he's not going to be like incontinent of urine. He's going to feel actually more comfortable. The body goes into what's called a ketotic state, so that you're burning off the proteins, and in the process of doing that, it releases natural opioids. So the body is built to stop eating and drinking at the end, and when the body perceives that that's happening because of this ketosis, what it does is it releases natural opioids so that people are more comfortable. It's made to do it that way. And so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you for explaining that and saying that, because it's hard not to have some feelings of, well, maybe we should have tried harder to feed him and make him take some broth and that kind of thing to try and save him, since he's held on for so long. It's kind of like, well, maybe he wants to live. He's held on so long, you know.
It's not a conscious I'm holding on so long. It's the body will stop when the body wants to stop, and that's really the whole principle of hospice. It doesn't hasten, but it doesn't postpone death. When the body's ready to stop pumping the blood, it'll stop. Now, you're saying, you read on the internet, 3 or 4 days. He's going on 9 days. My mom had a major, major stroke. And I went to take care of her. We had hospice support. She always wanted to die in her own home. She never wanted to go to a nursing home. She did not want CPR, didn't want artificial food and fluids. And so I would hold up, a spoon of yogurt, her favorite yogurt, and she would kind of mouth it, She never ate enough to support life, but it was what we call comfort feeding. It felt good in her mouth. At some point, and I don't even remember how many days into it, she didn't even want to do that. Now, what am I going to do? Hold her down and put the yogurt down her throat? Well, gosh, no, you don't want to do that to your dad. You don't want to have that memory. If he says no, it's no. And so then you just do good mouth care. Make sure, the mouth is clean. They make an artificial saliva. If his mouth happens to be dry, you can use a little artificial saliva. But other than that, all the research says that it is not uncomfortable not to eat and drink when you're in a terminal state. Now, to me, you want me to miss lunch? Wait a minute. This is wrong.
Right.
Because we're healthy and our bodies want to eat and our bodies want to drink, and even if our bodies didn't, our minds do. But that's not where your dad is. Your dad is doing something completely different. And and I'm a palliative care advanced practice nurse. So here's my mom. It was going on 2 weeks. And I called one of the docs I worked with. I said, geez, Louise, what's taking so long? I said, she's even still peeing. I don't know where the pee's coming from, because she had a catheter in. I'm like, geez, every day I'm emptying the catheter. Where is it coming from? It can go on for up to 3 weeks. Now, no, Sally, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that. But you said your goal was for him to go peacefully. And he's going peacefully, but in his own time. And so he's not uncomfortable. You guys don't like it. I totally appreciate that. But armed with some knowledge about it, you can say he's doing what he's going to do. And one day his heart will say, okay, that's enough. And that's okay. It's just hard with the waiting. And I know in my family would say, because I was the nurse, well, when's this going to end? It'd be like, after 2 weeks, let me tell you, Sally, I was getting cranky. It's like, I don't know.
Right.
It'll end when it ends.
and we are so appreciative that we have a hospice facility here where we live, and that we were able to transfer him out of the hospital because, understandably, the hospital is on lockdown right now because of COVID, so we were not allowed to go in, whereas we are allowed to go into the the hospice facility with PPE on. And of course we want him to feel surrounded by love when he passes. And so, I have 2 siblings, and every day we've been kind of going in there and sitting with him. And, my sister was reading him Tom Sawyer. Mark Twain was his favorite author, and we've been playing some of his favorite music and that kind of thing, thinking it was going to be, 3 or 4 days. But it helps having this more realistic expectation of 2 to 3 weeks. Of course,
it can be that long. It can, it can be 7 to 10 days. The average is about 7 to 10 days. But
that is helpful.
But there are some people who, my mom was over 2 weeks, Mm-hmm. And
there's also, the added worry of COVID. Every day we go in there, yes, we have PPE on, the gown, the mask, and the gloves, but, what if we accidentally touch our eye or somewhere on our face or something? And my siblings are educators, and they're going to be going back into the classroom in a few days. And,
he's not still COVID positive, is he? That should have.
Yes, he is. We had him retested.
Oh,
yes.
Lord.
We wanted my mom to come visit him, and so we had him retested, and he's still COVID positive.
Wow. Well, and that puts, a risk for your mom, so, having to protect her and how hard that is for her. But, she has to be able to have the opportunity to say goodbye. I always tell people there's 5 things that we need to say to people who are at the end of their life. And I'll tell you them in the order I remember them, as opposed to any particular order. I'm sorry. I forgive you. I love you. I'll miss you. And goodbye.
Oh, wow.
And the issue of, people say, they need permission to go. No, they don't. They need to hear you're going to be okay. And so for people to say, here's what I loved about you, Dad. Here's what I appreciated about you, Dad. Maybe I was a jerk when I broke the car or whatever it is that you did. Go through that and say, here's the things. And, I know you hurt me when you blah, 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 but I forgive you for that. And, I'm going to be okay. I love you, and goodbye. And each of your siblings, and if there's grandkids, and Mom needs to be able to do that. How much he can still understand, I don't know, but it doesn't really matter, because there's who knows what parts connect sometimes. It's still good for him to hear it, and it's important for you and your family's bereavement to say it.
Yes. And we have been trying to reassure him and say things like, we'll take care of Mom. It's okay to go. We'll miss you, but, we'll still be here, and, we'll take care of Mom and the grandkids, that sort of thing. But, yeah, I guess we just need to keep saying it and say all the 5 things that you mentioned. That's very helpful.
And, I don't know that it's really something that you have to keep saying, but I think it's good for everyone to know that they've said it once.
Right.
And just know that when his body's ready to go, it'll go. And I talk about my mom, after this major stroke, it was, 5 days before Christmas, and my kids were digging in her Christmas decoration closet, and putting up lights and putting up stuff, and just, my siblings were there, and it was wild, everybody's running around the little house. And I look over at my mom, and at the same time my sister looked over at my mom, and then we looked at each other, and she kind of mouthed, like, "Is she dead?" And I said, "I think so." And I laughed because it was so wild in the house, and the kids and the Christmas music, and in the middle of all of that, festivity was her moment that she just took her last breath, and none of us noticed. Mm-hmm. And it was like a great thing, I thought, for my kids, and I think even for my siblings, that, that's the difference between life and death is a single breath. And the body will decide when that breath will be. And you just let it happen. Don't feel guilty about it. His mind, with the Alzheimer's, had its issues, right, with that disease, and his body is now kind of catching up and will go to his reward when it's ready to go. But he's not suffering. And you guys, I would say, do not, I'm not very adamant about a whole lot, but do not feel guilty that he's not eating and drinking. I would feel much worse if you were trying to force it down him.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Those are issues I needed clarified, and I've been worried about and wondering about. And, who knew dying was so difficult and took so long, a natural death. But
it can.
It can. And we'll continue to, hold his hand and rub him and say kind words to him, and hope that he passes peacefully soon.
And I'd love for you to, send me an email, let me know how it goes. And if you have other questions, please be free to email me. And to our listeners, if you have questions and you would like to talk about them, I would love to talk about them with you. Do you have any other thoughts or questions, Sally, before we wrap this up?
I think you've covered everything I was concerned about. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been very helpful.
I'm so glad. And I'm sorry that your dad is reaching the end of his life. It's always a very profound loss when a parent is dying. You're fortunate to still have your mom.
Yes.
But it'll leave a hole, and it'll change things. And we have some good shows on grieving and that kind of thing that your family can listen to. Maybe your mom would enjoy listening to, because that's where the real hard work comes, is really after he dies.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, and I think that this is going to really help other people.
Very good. So please stay tuned for the unescaping escapades of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening.
Or the unending escapades.
What did I say? Oh yes, of course.
Unescaping.
Yes.
You can escape us by just not listening to us.
Please don't do that. But please don't do that. It was another test, along with the peanut candy thingamajiggy.
So what do I get for this test? Passing this test, what do I get?
The smarts.
What do I get? No, I don't. That's not what I want.
Okay, then how about Smarties? Remember those little Smarties and Smarties candies?
No.
Jeez.
I want a piece of Ray's pizza. Original.
So this is Charlie Navarrete, reminding you that you can't take it with you.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.